Granted, we cannot achieve total self-sufficiency, but at least Singapore will be able to have a buffer against events that can affect our food prices and food supply. Next, urban farming has potential to moderate urban heat island effect. So what is the urban heat island effect? This is mainly due to our urban environment. In cities such as Singapore, we have a lot of tall buildings, we have concrete pavements and roads. All of these are made of materials that are actually heat absorbing. So the surfaces of buildings and maybe the pavements, they actually absorb and retain heat, causing the temperature of the city to be higher as compared to the countryside. This in turn will boost the use of air conditioning and also increase carbon emissions, which is responsible for global warming. But with urban farming, the vegetations that we planted can actually provide shading and insulation to the buildings. This reduces the amount of money spent on cooling the building, cut down the energy usage, as well as reduce carbon emissions to the environment. Furthermore, the vegetations planted can actually improve air quality by trapping and absorbing the particulate air matter, trapping and absorbing the nitrous oxides from exhaust fumes of vehicles. Next, since we are bringing production of food nearer to the cities, the amount of pollution and the amount of energy involved in food transport can be greatly minimized. And in some cases, since we are growing our food in our own homes, there is no transportation involved at all. So in the long run, we are able to reduce the carbon footprint of the food that we are consuming, which is ultimately better for our environment. Last but not least, urban farming has its aesthetical benefits. We know that green is actually good for our eyes. So having access to or simply views of green areas can actually increase property value. They can also, views to green areas can actually increase workers' productivity and creativity, as well as having the potential for health therapy and horticultural therapy. So in a nutshell, the story goes like this. We, Singapore, is highly dependent on food imports So this makes us extremely vulnerable to external factors that will affect our food supply and food prices. So we propose urban farming. Urban farming has several benefits. First, it can alleviate dependency on food import. Secondly, it can moderate heat island effect. And third, of the aesthetical benefits that it can bring to Singapore. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for your kind attention. Are there any questions? Any questions?
What is the cost per household of this project?
If you utilize container farming with this container, right, this is actually 2 per piece of this container, so it's about $30. Then including the seeds and the soil, then it should not cost a lot. It's actually very cheap.
You mentioned one point on this farming actually providing shading. How does it do so? Because you are showing that small container, right? How does it actually provide shade?
When we are talking about shading, we are actually talking about more on rooftops. Because with all these container planting, right, it's actually supposed to stack up side by side. So as your plants grow, they actually provide shade onto the concrete roof below, and this will cool down the building sufficiently, because by providing shade like this, the sunlight doesn't actually get through to the ground.
And also, like what Stella mentioned just now, you can also put this like on the window sills, so it can actually reduce the glare of the sunlight into your house.
For the window sills, let's say if you place it by your window sills, do you need additional structure to support it? Or else it might be a hazard for the pedestrian who are walking around.
It actually comes with hooks on, which we did not bring yet.
Yes, so basically, for example, if this is your window sill, it basically just hooks onto here. Plus, this is very lightweight, made of plastic. So even with soil and your plant, it shouldn't weigh more than 2 kilograms, which is sufficient, which your window sills are very capable of holding. Any more questions? Yes,
I
Mark?
think you correlate urban farming with severe poverty. Wouldn't you think that is a bit a stretch too far? How
No,
do you
we are.
explain that?
If you had listened to my point, I was actually saying Singapore's affluence can afford food. However, we are at the mercy of other countries who can decide whether they want or not to sell food to us. So actually, this urban farming is not to prevent against us having no money to buy food. It's to prevent against countries not selling food to us. So this is how we are going to alleviate our food dependency problem.
And how about that poverty? How do you link that back to the poverty?
We have never linked to poverty. The slide on the Africa children was just to emphasize that without food, we might face starvation on that scale.
How are you gonna educate people on farming? Will you assume that everyone knows how to grow plants?
Okay, for this point, right, because this is actually very easy to implement, like what we mentioned just now, because of its low cost, and because it is relatively easier for normal citizens in Singapore to like do this. So we only need to maybe provide them with pamphlets to actually give them instructions on how to carry out this in their own homes. So that will be suitable to do this, because actually Professor Hugh Tan, he did this project with his student, and his student actually went to his whole block to actually introduce this to the citizens of the block, to the residents of the block. So he actually provide them with this, and to provide them with a pamphlet with the instructions, and they were all able to do it the proper way.
How about rooftop farming?
Okay, rooftop farming, of course, from our interview with the professors, we found that like currently there are also like gardens in normal residential areas, and those are actually need people to look after them as well. So if we are to implement rooftop farming in Singapore, of course we will need people to look after them. So maybe there can be like a person in charge of a few blocks of rooftop gardens or rooftop farms to take care of them.
Yes, Susan?
Is there any other country which is having a higher density to in population to farmland ratio being adopted to this solution?
If you are referring to whether other countries have actually adopted urban farming, Toronto is one, which we actually base quite a lot of our info on it, and New York is also another one, where Montreal is another one. And for New York, right, they actually successfully converted this church rooftop into a urban farm that is currently producing 30 tons of plants annually. So yeah.
What is the reason? Is it also because they are afraid of other country not providing the food to them, or is it for like organic, healthier lifestyle?
It's for both these reasons, because no country in the world is self-sufficient in food production right now. For example, the Philippines, they are growing rice, but vegetables, all that, they still need to get from countries such as China and all. So food dependency is still a very big problem for countries all around the world.
The rooftop is accessible to everyone.
No, like Hui-Ting said, one person will be taking care of a few blocks, so this person will be the only one authorized to access the rooftops because of safety concerns, obviously. So yeah.
What do you think the biggest challenges are for implementation of your proposal? What are the biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is to make the people in Singapore to understand how serious this problem is. They might feel that it's not related to them. They can still use their money to buy food in the supermarket. They are not aware of the extent of the seriousness of this problem. I think that will be the greatest challenge in implementing this rooftop urban farming in Singapore.
Any more questions? Alright.